Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to do a deep dive into something super relevant right now, green hydrogen auctions.
It's a hot topic.
Definitely. And to guide our deep dive today, we're going to be taking a look at a 2024 report from the International Renewable Energy Agency, or IRENA for short.
Sounds good.
I think folks might be surprised to hear that the world already produces a lot of hydrogen.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
The catch is that most of it is made from fossil fuels, so it's not exactly helping the planet.
Not exactly the clean solution we're looking for.
And this report had a crazy stat I had no idea. Nearly 85% of all ammonia produced goes into making fertilizer. That's a huge amount.
It is.
That means fertilizer prices are directly tied to natural gas prices,
Makes sense.
which makes food costs vulnerable to energy market swings, which is something we're all experiencing right now. And this is where green hydrogen has the potential to really shake things up.
Yeah, because with green hydrogen, you're creating a completely different process. It uses electrolysis, and it's powered by renewable energy sources.
So instead of using fossil fuels, we're basically using clean electricity to split water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen, right?
Exactly.
So essentially, we're making clean fuel using clean energy. That's a pretty elegant solution when you think about it.
It is.
But I know there's some pretty big challenges when it comes to green hydrogen, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things the report mentions is that it's really expensive and tricky to transport.
Yeah, that's definitely right. But, even with those challenges, green hydrogen has the potential to completely transform some of the heaviest industries out there, like steel and shipping, that are really hard to electrify.
Yeah, those are tough nuts to crack when it comes to going green.
They are. But green hydrogen can do it. And think about the benefits: new jobs, energy independence for some countries, and a big boost to economies.
So there are a lot of potential upsides if we could just figure out how to overcome those hurdles.
Exactly. And that's where these hydrogen auctions come in.
Auctions. So is it kind of like bidding on that rare vintage comic book you've always wanted?
In a way, yeah.
Except instead of comic books, we're talking about governments buying green hydrogen from companies, right?
Yeah. That's the basic idea. It's a competition where the government is acting as the buyer and companies making green hydrogen are the sellers.
So they're all competing to offer their green hydrogen at the best price.
Yeah, and the winner gets a contract to sell their hydrogen, which guarantees them revenue and makes investing in this, new and kind of risky technology more appealing.
Ah, okay. So it's like giving these companies a safety net to encourage them to jump into the green hydrogen world. And didn't this strategy already work with something else?
Absolutely. Auctions were a huge part of bringing down the cost of renewable electricity over the last decade, and the hope is that they can do the same for green hydrogen.
Makes sense. But the report gets even more interesting when it starts breaking down the different types of auctions. I had no idea there were 4 main types.
It's true. There's actually a whole range of options when it comes to designing these auctions.
So what are these 4 types? I'm super curious now.
Well, there's supply side, demand side, double-sided, and joint auctions.
Wow. Okay, a lot to unpack there. Let's start with supply side, since that seems to be the most common right now. What are those all about?
So supply-side auctions are all about boosting production. They're designed to support companies that are actually making the green hydrogen, like incentivizing more people to bake those clean energy cookies we talked about.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Right.
What about demand side auctions? Are those focused on the folks buying the green hydrogen?
Exactly. They're trying to help create a market by supporting companies that are going to actually use green hydrogen in their operations. It's about building that demand, not just the supply.
Okay, so they're working from the other side of the equation.
Right.
And then there are the more complicated ones, right? Double-sided auctions. The report described those as trying to match producers and buyers directly. Sounds kind of like a dating service for the green hydrogen world.
Kind of. And then you have joint options, which are the simplest type. In those, the producers and users team up before the auction and bid together as a package deal.
So it's like they're coming into the auction already holding hands, saying, hey, we're in this together.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have all these different types of auctions, but what actually makes them effective? Like, what goes into designing a good auction? It sounds like there's more to it than just, saying, hey, who wants to buy some green hydrogen?
Oh, absolutely. You're right. It's all about figuring out what you're trying to achieve with the auction and then fine-tuning all the different elements to reach those goals, like baking the perfect cookie you need to get the recipe right.
So what are some of those key ingredients that we need to think about?
Well, for starters, you have to decide what exactly you're auctioning off. Is it just the hydrogen itself, or are you also auctioning off guarantees to buy a certain amount? Or maybe even subsidies to help companies build the facilities to produce green hydrogen in the first place?
So are we auctioning off the cookie or the ingredients and the oven too?
Right. You also have to think about how much hydrogen you're auctioning off. Is it one giant batch? Or are you spreading it out over time in smaller amounts? Because that affects how predictable things are for the companies involved and how willing they'll be to make those big investments.
That makes sense. And of course, you have to think about location, right? I mean, where are these green hydrogen plants going to be built?
Absolutely. Imagine you're the government trying to decide where these new plants should go. Maybe you want to make sure that jobs stay local or that the plants are built near existing infrastructure. You can actually control all of that through the design of the auction.
Wow, so these auctions can really shape the whole landscape of the green hydrogen industry.
They can. And then there's the question of technology. Can companies use any type of equipment they want to produce this green hydrogen?
I was wondering about that, yeah.
Well, the auction can be open to all technologies, or it might actually favor specific types that are really promising, but maybe need a little boost to become commercially viable.
So it's like saying, for this baking contest, we're only accepting chocolate chip cookies, but we're open to different recipes and techniques.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the question of who gets to buy the hydrogen.
Right, like is it just private companies, or can the government buy it directly?
Exactly. You could even have international buyers getting involved. And that gets into the whole geopolitical side of energy, which is a whole other conversation.
Okay, I'm starting to see how much thought really goes into designing these auctions. It's not just about getting the lowest price, it's about shaping the entire future of the green hydrogen market.
Exactly. And finally, you have to think about how you actually choose a winner. Does the lowest price automatically win? Or can you consider other things, like the environmental impact of a company's production process, or whether they're creating jobs in your community?
So it's like having all these different levers you can pull to steer the market in the direction you want.
It is. And the exciting part is that all of this isn't just theory. There are already green hydrogen auctions happening all over the world.
Really? So this is actually happening right now?
It is. And each country is doing things a little bit differently, which is really interesting. Shall we take a look at some real-world examples?
Yes, please. Let's see how all of this plays out in practice.
Okay, so let's look at what's happening around the world with these green hydrogen auctions. Chile is a great example. They were one of the first to really get into this.
What did they do that was so interesting?
Well, they decided to think beyond just the cheapest option. They wanted to make sure the companies they were backing were ready to go.
So it was about more than just getting the lowest price.
Exactly. They used a multi-criteria auction. So they also considered things like how far along a company's project was and their overall experience.
Makes sense. Did it work?
It seems like it. They ended up funding 6 projects, which is pretty impressive.
6 projects. Wow. What kind of scale are we talking about here?
Those 6 projects will total almost 400 megawatts of electrolyzer capacity, and they used their whole budget for this round of auctions.
How much was their budget?
USD $50 million.
Wow, so they kickstarted 6 projects with just $50 million. That's a pretty good deal considering how expensive this technology is. What about other countries? How are they approaching this?
Well, Denmark is a really interesting case. They're all about maximizing hydrogen production. They want to make as much as possible.
Okay, how are they doing that?
They've got this really clever system with a 2-tier ceiling price. Basically, they set a higher initial price limit and then a lower secondary limit.
So what happens if a company bids below that lower limit?
Then they close the auction early and use all the money to fund those lower price projects. It's like a safety net.
Ah, I see. So it incentivizes companies to be more competitive on price while still ensuring that the government gets a good deal.
Exactly. And then there's the European Union, which is taking a pretty unique approach.
What are they doing?
They're using something called a fixed premium model for their European hydrogen bank auctions. Basically, producers are guaranteed a certain amount of money on top of the market price for their green hydrogen.
So even if the market price drops, they're still guaranteed to make a profit.
Exactly.
That's a pretty sweet deal for the companies.
Yeah.
Is it working?
It seems like it. They received bids totaling over 15 times their available budget.
15 times. That's incredible. There's obviously a lot of interest in green hydrogen in Europe.
There is. And they also have this other really cool mechanism called auctions as a service.
Auctions as a service. What is that?
It allows individual countries within the EU to fund promising projects that didn't win the main auction.
Ah, so it's like a second chance for those projects that were almost good enough.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got Chile, Denmark, the EU.
Yeah.
What about Germany? Are they doing anything interesting with these auctions?
Germany's approach is a little different. They're not directly auctioning off green hydrogen. Instead, they're trying to make it more appealing for businesses to switch to green hydrogen by using carbon contracts.
Carbon contracts. Those are something I haven't heard much about.
Well, essentially, they put a price on carbon emissions. So if a company pollutes a lot, they have to pay for it, which makes cleaner options like green hydrogen look a lot more attractive.
So it's like creating a market environment where green hydrogen is the more sensible choice.
Exactly.
Clever. And it takes the pressure off the government to pick winners and losers.
Yeah. What about India? I think you'll find their approach interesting.
Okay, what are they doing?
India is really going all in on green hydrogen. They want to become a global leader in this space.
That's ambitious.
It is. And they're holding separate auctions for different green hydrogen technologies. They're really exploring all the options.
So they're not putting all their eggs in one basket.
Exactly.
Okay, last but not least, what about the UK? What's their approach?
The UK has this long-term vision for their auctions, all the way to 2029. And they're using a system called Contracts for Difference. It guarantees a certain revenue stream for green hydrogen producers.
Ah, so even if the market price goes down, those companies are protected.
Exactly. And what's even more interesting is that they're constantly tweaking their auction design based on what's working and what's not.
So it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing.
Definitely not. They're constantly learning and adapting.
Okay, so it sounds like there's no one-size-fits-all solution here. Each country is kind of figuring things out as they go along.
That's right. There's no magic formula. It's all about finding what works best in your own unique context.
Which is why it's so important to share these experiences and learn from each other.
Absolutely. And that's something that this IRENA report really emphasizes.
Speaking of the report, I wanted to circle back to something it mentioned about the potential downsides of too much competition in these auctions.
Oh, yeah. That's a really important point. You know, if companies are constantly being forced to undercut each other just to win contracts, it could actually stifle innovation.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
If you push them too hard on price, they might start cutting corners or sacrificing quality.
Exactly. And we don't want that. We need those companies to be investing in research and development, pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
So how do we strike that balance?
Yeah.
How do we encourage competition without stifling innovation?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. But the report suggests that governments need to think carefully about the criteria they use to choose winners in these auctions. It's not just about getting the lowest price, it's about finding companies that are committed to innovation, sustainability, and creating good jobs.
So it's about taking a more holistic view, looking beyond just the bottom line.
Exactly. And it also means having an open dialogue between governments, industry players, and researchers.
We need to be talking to each other, sharing our experiences, and learning from our mistakes.
Absolutely. This is a journey we're all taking together.
It really feels like we're at a turning point with green hydrogen. It's not just a niche technology anymore.
It's definitely going mainstream, and these auctions are a big part of that. They're helping to drive down costs and create a real market for green hydrogen.
But as we talked about earlier, we have to be careful not to let that focus on cost come at the expense of quality and innovation.
That's right. The report makes a good point about that. You know, if companies are constantly under pressure to offer the lowest possible price, they might start cutting corners.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, you get what you pay for.
Exactly. And in the case of green hydrogen, that could mean sacrificing things like safety, durability, or even the environmental benefits that we're trying to achieve in the first place.
So how do we walk that tightrope? How do we make sure that green hydrogen stays on track to be that game changer we need it to be?
Well, I think the key is to remember that price is only one piece of the puzzle.
There's got to be more to it than just getting the cheapest deal.
Right. Governments need to design these auctions in a way that encourages companies to think long-term. Think about things like investing in research and development, prioritizing sustainability, and creating good jobs.
So it's about taking a more holistic approach, looking beyond just the immediate cost savings.
Exactly. And it also means fostering a sense of collaboration and knowledge sharing between everyone involved. Governments, companies, researchers, we all need to be talking to each other, learning from each other's experiences.
It's like we're all part of this giant experiment, figuring out how to make green hydrogen work on a global scale.
I love that analogy because that's exactly what it is. There's no roadmap for this. We're all learning as we go. But I think that's also what makes it so exciting.
Well, This deep dive has definitely given me a much better understanding of the complexities and the potential of green hydrogen. What are some of the key takeaways you'd like our listeners to remember?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's important to recognize that green hydrogen is not just some futuristic fantasy.
Hmm.
It's a real solution that's happening right now.
Yeah, we've seen concrete examples of that in this deep dive. Countries all over the world are already embracing this technology.
And those examples show us that there's no one-size-fits-all approach. Each country is figuring out what works best for them.
Which is why it's so crucial to share these experiences and learn from each other's successes and failures.
Absolutely. We need to be constantly learning and adapting as we go. But I think the most important thing is to stay optimistic. Green hydrogen has the potential to truly transform our world.
It can help us address climate change, create jobs, boost economies, and even reshape the global energy landscape.
It's a game changer, and I'm really excited to see what the future holds.
I am too. And to our listeners, we encourage you to keep exploring this topic. Look up some of the options we discussed, see what's happening in your own country, and maybe even share your own thoughts and ideas.
You never know, you might just spark the next big breakthrough in green hydrogen.
And that's it for our deep dive into green hydrogen auctions. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the fascinating world of clean energy.